everybody, and welcome to Baggage Claim. I'm Katrina.
I'm Julia, and this is a show about living with mental health in today's society. Tonight, we're going to be talking to you all about post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
And I am Mel, and we are here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we need to remind everyone that we are not mental health professionals, we are mental health patients. I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So, you're in a room and you're hanging with your friends and you're doing stuff you've done before, and you're watching a movie that you've watched a million times together, to the point where you decide to make fun of the Southern accents and the funny ladies. And you're in the room with these people that you've seen and been with 100 times before, and you're about to hear something that's going to change your life forever. And that's what it was like for me the night that I found out that my dad was in the hospital, and it was the night he passed away. And to this day, 21 years later, I cannot watch that movie. I can't hear that movie on in the background. I managed to go a solid couple of decades without seeing that movie anywhere. And then it happened to be on one night, and it was like I was back in that room 20 years later, and back on that night, and sitting in the car with my best friend driving me to the hospital. And that moment has redefined my life. And that moment was my first major traumatic event that has been traced and is directly related to my diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And that is what we are going to talk about tonight. So this one is going to be a little tricky for me, but also really important. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because I know my co-host learned a little bit going through this. And I think a lot of people are going to too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think every episode I'm learning something new, but this one in particular really hit a nerve with me. And we'll get into that probably a little bit later, but I didn't really know much about PTSD. Except that it was, soldiers got it. That's, so yeah, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah, for me too. I couldn't agree more. I wasn't sure who got PTSD, but it was something that I didn't know anything about. I didn't know how it was treated. I didn't know what the prognosis was. I didn't know if it lasted a day or a month or a lifetime. I've done a lot of research this past week, and it's opened my eyes to a lot of things, and Mel has opened my eyes to a lot of things through her experience, which she's going to share more with us tonight. So I'm very grateful to have her here.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah. We know it's not easy, so
it's important. That's why we're doing this.
So I think we start with what really is PTSD. We have a short 5-minute video that I thought did a really good job explaining it. So let's go ahead and play that. Hopefully this works. Okay, can you see it? Yes, okay.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, also called PTSD, happens when some memory of a past traumatic event, like war or sexual assault, causes recurrent mental and physical distress. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, or the DSM-5, categorizes PTSD as a trauma and stressor-related disorder. That happens when symptoms of an acute stress response persist for over a month. The main symptoms are psychological ones. For example, someone might re-experience their trauma through nightmares, flashbacks, and intrusive thoughts. But these can lead to behavioral changes as well. Somebody might start to avoid environments and situations that remind them of their trauma and feel a sense of hypervigilance, where they're constantly on guard, or hyperarousal, where they have this exaggerated startle response to the smallest of triggers. Not surprisingly, all these thoughts and behaviors can lead to trouble sleeping and general irritability, which can lead to angry outbursts. Interestingly, this pattern is different for young children, who are less likely to show distress, but instead they might use play to express their memories, sometimes acting out scenes that trouble them. Whether or not someone develops PTSD in response to trauma is determined by a number of different factors. For example, it's clear that interpersonal trauma, like rape or violent muggings, are more likely to result in PTSD than accidents or environmental disasters. In addition, people that go through extreme trauma as children are more likely to develop PTSD in response to other traumas faced in their adult life. Having said that, if someone manages to develop effective coping strategies for trauma, including having a social support network, then that can help with future traumas as well. As far as causes go, there are some clues about biological factors related to the development of PTSD. For example, people with dysfunctions of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, deficits in the arousal and sleep regulating systems in the brain, and problems with the endogenous opioid system, which helps with pain control, have all been shown to be at higher risk for developing PTSD. PTSD has also been linked to having a family history of mood disorders or anxiety disorders. The precise mechanism, though, that ties all these relationships together has yet to be worked out. Treatment for PTSD can be kind of complicated, since people with the disorder are often reluctant to engage with the trauma in any way, in their thoughts, their emotions, or in their conversations, which can make treatment really hard. Research has shown that exposure therapy, which slowly exposes individuals to situations that cue recall the trauma, can be very effective. Group therapy is also a popular choice for people with PTSD because it provides survivors with a safe place to relive their trauma in a supportive environment. In terms of medications, antidepressants, in particular selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, can help to reduce depressive symptoms that often accompany PTSD and can help minimize flashbacks and nightmares. Anti-anxiety medications can help decrease the heightened physiological arousal often seen in people with PTSD. And finally, sleep aids can be helpful because lack of sleep and restlessness is such a serious problem with PTSD. In addition to this, a lot of people with PTSD self-medicate with alcohol and other substances, which can actually worsen their symptoms and their overall health. So, an important treatment consideration for both therapy and medications is to help alleviate their symptoms while also safely managing substance abuse issues. So, as a quick recap, PTSD usually happens after a violent interpersonal trauma and involves recurring thoughts that persist for over a month and can be managed with effective coping strategies and medications.
Everything there is accurate.
I was gonna ask, how accurate is it?
It's very accurate, and it's the reliving it over and over one that was really the one where is because you basically have, after that happened, because my father was young, he was 44. So what ended up happening is that everything was a catastrophe anytime anything happened, and because it was this super rare thing, I have had therapists tell me, that's a rare thing, and you have to understand that that's not something that happens to most people. And so for you to sit around and think every single person in your life when they get sick or bang their toe or whatever is dying is going to drive you insane, or that I'm dying because my father was young, and so there must be, that's where a lot of my anxiety comes from. It's just bottom line is that sort of thinking that because and then I have had uncles also pass away. So it's one of these things where the more it compounds itself, the more you start to think, oh, well, I'm never going to make it out of my 40s, and I'm never going to do. And then it's hard because I did self-medicate to a degree, but I went agoraphobic, really, is what happened, where it was like I wasn't leaving the house, and it was so bad, and I wasn't able to, I lost a job and was stuck in the house, and that was when it was like intervention time, like you need to go see somebody. This is not normal. And that's when I got a diagnosis, but not the right diagnosis, and it wasn't that initial therapist that gave me the post-traumatic stress, but a couple therapists down the road, which we'll obviously get into, but a lot of because of depression and anxiety. Okay, but depression and anxiety don't include reliving the events over and over and obsessing about them over and over and catastrophizing to the degree where you can't do things.
Those are just some really scary thoughts to have. I know that I've had thoughts. My mom passed away young, so I was always like, I'm not gonna live past my 30s, right? So, but it's scary. Anytime I think that is scary. So, I just can't imagine. I'm just so sorry that you have to, live through that.
And go ahead, Julia. Did you?
No, go ahead. I was just nodding. I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure I'm giving everyone a chance in here because I have developed coping strategies, fortunately. And, what's great about my family and friends that were, a lot of them that were there that night are in my life, and some of those people are still a part of my life. So, and in that time, I've also been able to because I finally got the right diagnosis and I found the right therapist and I did start figuring out why I was feeling the way I was feeling and that it wasn't just anxiety and depression, that there was something bigger to this situation. I didn't just lose him. He didn't have a will. So I became the person that was, dealing with his estate. And I was taking care of my sister at the time because of the circumstances the way that they were. And so she moved in with me. And I had overnight, I had lost my father, who I was good, bad, or indifferent. I was incredibly close to. It took me until very recently to really realize how close we were because of going through some of this stuff. Is that the reason that I did take it as hard as I did was that not that we weren't close, but we were very close, and that my entire was the whole parts of my personality and the kinds of things that I did and the way that I approached the world had to do with our relationship and the way that we conducted it, regardless of, we were fighting at that point, which created things, but ultimately it was to come to terms with that's a rare thing, and getting the guilt in line, dealing with all those things. But again, it's a constant struggle. It's been 21 years. I'm sitting here having this discussion. I have these moments, especially on dates, the day he died, the birthday, the days that were Memorial Day weekend was a huge deal in our family. Summer is really tough for us just because that was when we spent the most time off the field, as it were, out of the office, as a family. We actually spent time being family. And so, yeah, it's a struggle, but I think that video was perfect because it hit a lot of the things that make the difference in them saying, no, you're depressed or you're anxious or you're whatever, you're grieving. And no, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It also sounds like to me, it's kind of like, I have bipolar type 2 disorder, with underlying depression and anxiety and things like that. So it sounds like it's just really it's a starting point, right? It gives you that answer that you've been looking for, but never you knew it was out there, right? Because I feel like I know that feeling. You have been diagnosed with something, but it's not right. Something else is going on, is I think what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so to go through that, crazy. I kind of lost my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's okay. Let's look at who does get PTSD other than Mel, because other people do too. Mm-hmm. And those people, well, let's see. I have some statistics here that we can go through. About 70% of adults experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. And then of those 70%, about 20% of people who experience a traumatic event will develop PTSD following that event. About
That's
8 million
high.
people, yeah, it is a lot of people.
Yeah.
About 8 million people have PTSD in a given year, and about 1 in 13 people will develop PTSD at some point in their lifetime. So these are high numbers of people who are struggling with this disorder. And people think this is just a veteran's disorder, which of course it isn't. As we're learning, this can affect any man, woman, or child who's witnessed or experienced a traumatic event.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The the military thing is kind of a big one, because as we've been discussing along the way, is you get twofold of an issue there. One is that we think it's only for veterans. So we don't give people the proper treatment that they need. They get anxiety and depression and, bipolar, or, which isn't terrible, but it's not the right diagnosis necessarily. But also you're slapping veterans with one sort of catch-all diagnosis, and maybe that's not right for them either. So to me, this pendulum swings both ways, because on the one hand, it does get conflated with, veterans. Oh, were you in the war? But on the other hand, it also says all veterans get PTSD and no other mental health problems. And that can be troublesome too, because they may not have some of these issues. Obviously, those, the traumatic war situation isn't going to affect you. But what if you have schizophrenia? What if you have bipolar on some level? You're not being treated for that. You're being treated for the catch-all thing we slap on veterans, and that's it.
Right, and you're right. Go ahead.
Just really fast, it's kind of like, what is that underlying issue, right? That's maybe was there before that traumatic event happened that we might be missing. So.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, if we come at it from the viewpoint that you have to be a veteran to have PTSD, then treatment for all these people who may have PTSD who weren't veterans is going to be delayed because their symptoms are going to be misinterpreted, which sounds like it happened to you, Mel, and that you were assumed to have anxiety and depression when really your diagnosis was PTSD all along.
Yeah, and I didn't start getting the right help. And like we talked about with Valerie last week, is that sort of delay, that 10-year delay from letting it go away or dismissing the situation, and how that affects both patients and mental health professionals who are trying to help each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think speaking of getting the right diagnosis, there's a criteria that has to be met. And this was really interesting to me because I didn't realize there was such a strict criteria that had to be met very specifically. So if we could walk through that a little bit, I think that would be great. It's on the signs and symptoms link.
Yes, let me
share that with everyone.
I have it. You guys, I'm sorry. It's, live
You're
broadcast.
fine.
Huh.
We're awesome.
All right. Let's see.
So if you scroll down a little bit.
Keep going.
Yeah. So in the most recent publication of the DSM, the DSM-5, the PTSD symptoms are grouped into 5 different clusters. 1 or more symptoms are required from each of these clusters in order for a patient to receive a full diagnosis. So the clusters include, do you guys want to read some of them?
Yeah, so like direct exposure to trauma. Am I in the right one? Yeah.
Yeah, stressors. So for the stressor cluster, at least one of these symptoms is required.
Yeah, so direct exposure to the trauma, witnessing a trauma, exposure to trauma by being a first responder, such as police, firefighter, medic, or crisis counselor, or learning that someone close to you experienced the trauma.
Mel, did you have any of those?
I definitely the close to me, because my sister was there that night, but then also the sort of just the interpersonal experience of, I wasn't there, but I was close.
Right.
It was but yeah, a lot of these things, they're really, for me, it was interesting to do the review because I do go through them, and I struggle, and then I have to remind myself of my diagnosis. And so I see these things and I go, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's not me, having this thing or that thing. It's me having, but I feel like not witnessing, but the hearing of it, because again, like my sister and I are very close, and she was there, and she was much younger than me. And so it was like she was there kind of by herself. So there's that situation. Yeah. And again, we were really close. So I did a lot of blaming myself, and, still have moments where it's like, well, where was I? I should have been there, not, the 16-year-old. It should have been me there with them taking hold of, as if somehow that was going to make a difference. And it's just, there's no way of knowing those things. And so that was where I experienced, there was a lot of guilt and things like that. So that really exacerbated everything for me because of the circumstances of this sort of out of the blue experience. And I understand why medics get it. I've worked with children and I've been there when kids have gotten seriously injured, and I can see how the parents react and things like that. I do think that it has set me up to be okay in some of those situations because I know what to do in some of those situations, but also I'm very empathetic in those situations to everyone around me having that moment where it's like, holy shit, like this is crazy. And it's not normal, but life comes at you fast. I mean, it just appears out of nowhere. And that's kind of the point of a trauma is it's life showing up at a time that you're not expecting and doing a thing to your brain that has a far-reaching effect.
Totally.
I'm not surprised that people like first responders get that situation because of you show up and don't know what to expect. And then your life is different all of a sudden. And there's no going backwards from that moment.
Yeah.
So there's intrusion symptoms. One of these is required to get a diagnosis. And this is the person who is exposed to the trauma, then re-experiencing the trauma in one or more ways that could include flashbacks, nightmares, distressing and intense memories, distress or physical reactions after being exposed to reminders known as triggers.
I have the last one you read there, and I have sort of a situation where I've had multiple brain surgeries as well. So I've had 3 brain surgeries. So I had PTSD diagnosis from this, and then I ended up in the hospital for an extended period of time. So I have a massive, hospitals are not a good place for me. And that's already a problem. No kidding. What? You hate the hospital? No, you don't understand. Like, to the point where I was talking to you guys about this a little bit is that because I spent so much time in there, and there has been some studies on this, when the pandemic did hit hard, I had a whole conversation with my husband where I basically told him that I was not going to die alone in a hospital and that I would sequester myself in a basement and stay away from him. And there's a bathroom down there, and just because fear of those things repeating themselves is that, effectively, sometimes in my mind, if I walk into a hospital, I or someone I love isn't coming out, is like the mindset you get in. And it's like, just like with any of these, it seems irrational, but in your head, it's very, very real. And that's tough. It's one of those things where you have to work on it all the time. And I did have nightmares for a long time. That was early on in the process. Not just the medications that they were giving me started throwing at me, but I also had and still occasionally I have very vivid dreams about some of the events or seeing the people that I've lost in those dreams and having a struggle with that, where I literally in my dreams will tell them they can't be here. So it's that lucid where you're like, you're not here. You can't be here. I know I am dreaming you. And that is those are tough because the person's there. I mean, your brain can do amazing things to you when it really wants to and make you feel like you're actually in a place with a person in an amazing way. And so I definitely have those sorts of things going on there.
But do you see, are the dreams, they're not good? Like, are they bad?
They are and they aren't, because in some way you're like, I get to see this person that I care about, right? But on the other hand, this is a fucking nightmare because I'm seeing that person and I know full well in that moment, I can't even enjoy that moment of seeing that person. So to me, that's kind of
because it's not real.
Deep cut is like, I can't just have this nice dream and enjoy myself and wake up sad and kind of get over it. I actually am in the dream physically talking to that person. Like, you can't be here. You're not here. It's not possible that you're here. And they mess me up. I mean, it doesn't happen. What's interesting about those is they happen when they feel like happening. The last time I had one was when I was traveling in 2016. And I was just kind of off my own schedule, and it was very random. And it wasn't all bad, but it definitely threw me off for that period of time where I kind of had to be like, you're in a beautiful country that it doesn't belong to you. So just pay attention to this and smile and know that these people would want you to be happy. And that's something that I've had to come to terms with. But again, it's finding that place. We've all had to find a place to coexist with our mental health. And so I do that by, enlisting the help of friends and family and having these discussions with humans in the world. And I mean, on this level, but I also talk to other people about it because I like to, I've had a friend recently lose a parent pretty suddenly. And I've found a weird space where I've landed in where it's like, I have to balance getting triggered with being really good friends to my friend because I know what he's going through right now. And that's an interesting balance, but there is therapy in it. And the fact that I can be there and help him to not go through some of the things I went through and potentially say, hey, if you're feeling like this, there's all these potential outlets for you to go. And I would say in a grief situation, I think that a group of grieving people is a much better prospect than going to a one-on-one therapist, which can be much tougher. Because one of the things about a group is that when you walk into a group, it's a bunch of people who have been where you were or were where you are today. So you're walking in there brand new, feeling the grief, let's say, this is similar to like maybe addiction, where you walked in on your first day feeling the way you are. The people in the room know what it's like to feel the way you felt when you walked through the door. So if you went to a grief group, a lot of the people that are at the group already remember what it was like the first day they realized that they needed help with their grief, for example. So that's something I do sort of in lieu of trying to like start a relationship with a one-on-one therapist, which we all know is a difficult thing. Go find a support group. It's the best way to deal with some of these, because there's people with experience at what you are dealing with today that they've had their experience for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or something, who can kind of look at you and go, I know how you're feeling. It's okay. Here's a way to go to get through this. And also you can look at me and see that you can get there. You're not there today, but you can get there.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the group therapy. I think that's the one thing when I went into the mental health program that I went into, that was, it was the best part. And it was where I always say this, it's where I always got my aha moments, because it's really when other people are telling their stories and you're like, wait, I do that? Wait, I do. Or like, I don't know, something will usually just kind of open up. And I love those types of moments.
I think by listening to other people, we hear the things that we want to be, how we should be like parenting ourselves. We hear those things that we should be telling ourselves, and we're able to say, oh, okay, well, if you're going to treat yourself that kindly, maybe I can be kind to myself too. Or like, I agree with you, Mel, like when, like the relation of like, I was where you are, that sort of, I'm losing my train of thought, but just it's that relationship.
It's non-judgmental.
Yes.
I think the word that I was even trying to find myself is that it's a person, because they understand where you are when you walk through the door, they are not going to judge what you are feeling at that moment. The fear, the guilt, the pain, they all understand because they've been there. And again, you make a choice to go to a group therapy session for the most part. So you're choosing to know that somebody new is walking through that door at some point, at many points, and that you're choosing to use your mental wellness. One of the ways you're choosing to use it is by helping people through what you got through. And that, again, like even with what Valerie said last week, where a lot of the people in the profession are doing it because they experienced an event that made them want to go help people because they have the empathy. So I think that's why I think similar like groups are a viable option to start.
By being of service to others, we really get to help ourselves.
Exactly.
I mean, we talk about this all the time, how this is great therapy for us. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And definitely. It is. It really is. I know we need to finish up.
Yeah, so
that article.
Number 3 was unpleasant changes to moods or thoughts. 2 of these symptoms are required for a diagnosis of PTSD. Blaming self or others for the trauma, decreased interest in things that were once enjoyable, negative feelings about the self and the world, inability to remember the trauma clearly, difficulty feeling positive, feelings of isolation or negative affect, and difficulty feeling positive.
And I definitely get the, so there's some of it, is seizure related as well, but I got it well before, and that was.
Sorry. I thought that was important.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Kia.
Good.
Thanks,
That's
Kia.
good. That's why we're here. And that's good too, because if a few people that are watching decide to go check something out that might help them, that starts breaking the cycle that we're in of people not getting help, people being stigmatized for seeking help.
We're not talking about it. Let's freaking talk about it.
Yeah,
guys.
we need to talk about these things, especially if it's affecting 8 million people a year are going to have a, period of this. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of adults. And that's a lot of adults who affect other adults and who affect children and who affect the society that we live in. And we don't need that. We can fix it. We know what to do. But I mean, the feelings of just that utter hopeless and the isolation thing were ones that I've definitely, the isolation one is one that's kind of a go-to for me, is going completely, off the grid in my own sort of world where it's no anything, no internet, no TV, no nothing. I don't want to look at anything. I don't want to hear anything. I almost toxically want to be alone with my own just crazy bullshit, just thoughts that I don't want.
You're just miserable, but you just want to be alone.
And you can convince yourself of a lot of bad things when you're in that hole, and it's not doing any good. But it's also those sort of feeling outside of yourself deal. That one is one that it's sort of this looking out or looking back at a person that you don't realize. It's not what the hell? What am I doing? Who am I? How am I functioning? Why am I functioning? Why is it me and not, or, why am I here and those people aren't here? That is a real thought that you have, where at least I have, I can speak for myself exclusively, is that why is this person alive and this person isn't alive? It's that's not healthy. It's not healthy to sit, because there's literally nothing that can be done about that sort of thing. And so you have these really just this guy is this, and he's out there and he's got all this money and all this power and all this stuff, and my dad is gone. And that's why it's important to have outlets and places to talk about it, and to find comfort in being able to say those words out loud, so that I'm addressing that and not thinking it in my own head, and ultimately being a nasty person or an angry person, which is how mine tends to manifest, is those irritability spurts, the anger, I'm packing all my things and leaving, and that's it. And it's okay, but you've been married for 18 years. Don't be crazy. Calm down. It's okay. But it happens. It happens to the best of us. And it's normalizing it is what's going to make it so that people don't hurt themselves or others.
I would
absolutely
think that it would be difficult to, if you have control issues, PTSD would be something very difficult to struggle with, because letting go of that sense of control, that you didn't have any control over any of this, that you don't have any control over most of the things that happen in the world, that really all you can control is your own actions and reactions. That's a very difficult thing to accept, especially if you're dealing with a traumatic event that you wish you could change for all the world.
You get nihilistic. It's very easy to go down the sort of the void, and it doesn't matter what I do, and it doesn't matter what other people do. And yeah, you have to stop yourself. And again, I've said this plenty of times on the show, where I will stop myself in mid pace and be what are you doing right now? What is happening right now? What are you thinking about right now? The control portion of it is, yes, you can't control everything, but also you don't need to get nihilistic about control. You can, because people go to work and come home from work, and it's okay. And it's too much. What I actually came to really when I started doing is that you miss out on too much that's worthwhile when you're alive and living. And so if you can put those things in their right place, you go on living with those people at heart, so that if something does happen again, which inevitably does happen in life, you've done everything you can to remember that person and be with that person and enjoy that person's company and everything else. Is that I've had some lost experiences since then because of my PTSD, where I've been able to handle them better, because I said, well, I met that person on the first day that we were doing that thing, and I knew them the entire time, and I sought them out every time we had a chance at festival or whatever. And so I was able to maximize the 7 or 8 years I knew that person. And so I can look at the situation as I'm glad I knew that person, instead of, I hate that I knew that person because I hurt, which happens.
Yeah. I just want to add to our audience members, we love therapy. We love therapists. We see therapists. We do work out a lot of issues in therapy. And I think it's important. So I just want to say that, because I don't think you can do it alone, like we've been talking about. But we love therapists.
I think it's really good that you said that too, is that we love therapists. We love mental health professionals that are out there killing themselves. Just like, they want to find us as much as we want to find them. And I know that they're out there, because I wouldn't be here with a healthy diagnosis and a healthy balance of medication if I hadn't found the person. But that's where we talk about being your own advocate.
Absolutely. Actually, speaking of being your own advocate, can I just have a side rant really fast?
Yeah.
So, you guys have heard some of this, but we started this doing the show. We always do a bunch of research beforehand, and I'm going through it, and I'm just like, this is wrong. Something's wrong. I should have, something happened in my life. This sounds like me. And my mother passed away from AIDS when I was really young. And that affected my whole family. I mean, nothing was ever the same, in a very traumatic way I'm talking about. So, I wouldn't say her death was because I was, 2, this was the early 90s. Her death wasn't the trigger, but the ramifications of her death definitely were, and it all went back to that. And so I was just thinking about all this stuff, and I'm calling my dad, how could we have never been diagnosed with PTSD? And he's giving me a rant. And then I finally got a hold of my sister today, and I go, Brittany, I'm doing this show on YouTube, blah, blah, we're doing PTSD. What the heck? Why weren't we diagnosed with this? And she goes, Katrina, that's my main diagnosis.
There you go.
You never knew?
And I never knew. I'm an awful sister, for one. But yeah, with underlying, severe anxiety disorder. But it all made sense. My sister for sure, 100% PTSD. And I'm thinking in my head, what is wrong, with our system and, everything. And then she was diagnosed at 16.
Well, you weren't wrong when you did the research. You knew that it pointed to your family.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm sure my dad has it as well, but dang, it really opens your eyes.
Do you feel like you have PTSD?
Yeah, I think in a way I do, but I'm really good at masking those, any thought that would come up that was negative. I'm good at masking it. So that's where it's hard for me to say, I can get around it pretty well. So
it's part of your experience without necessarily being your diagnosis. That's the reason, when we said before, when we were talking about veterans, is that's why it's really important not to have a sort of slap it on anybody. I mean, these soldiers may have PTSD, but they might be bipolar and have PTSD. They might be manic and have some of these. They might have a multiple personality borderline situation going on. it doesn't, just like anything, it's with all the mental health situations that we always talk about, is that having the right tools. So mental health professionals, patients, and everyone in between, having the right tools. It's that the stigma, and I mean, let's be honest, the health insurance situation, or lack thereof, get in the way of all of us getting what we need for our mental health. And that's everybody and anybody who is, we say it, Julia said it from the beginning, everyone has mental health. It should be part of your checkup every year. Every single person should have to answer that questionnaire we've all answered about 100 times, the scorecard, if you're thinking of this and thinking of that, because if you can say it's not normal, I mean, I think a lot of people think, well, insomnia is normal. No, it's not. It actually isn't. There's usually very significant underlying causes of insomnia. Some people it's normal for. Some people it's an indication that they have some sort of larger deal. So what else do you have when you have these things? It's like the mental health screening situation with Medical Health America, where you can go online and kind of get that mental health screening and sort of say, like, do I have a thing? I think that's why those screening tools might be really vital to people, is to point them. And I actually linked that on our last video, is that mental health screening from Mental Health America that Valerie mentioned. I put it on there, the correct one. And I think that actually, I went on there just to see what it was like. And it was pretty cool to get this sort of like rundown of, oh, okay, this is cool, because it gives people something to go talk to someone about. You might have PTSD, you might have manic depression, you might have MPD, you might have bipolar, you don't know. So it gives you something to point to, because I think half the reason it's intimidating for people is that, where do you start?
Well, here, wait, before we go down this road, I think we need to say this. Listen, none of us got our correct diagnosis seeing the first doctor that we saw. Right. None of us got the correct medication the first time around. Mental health care can be exhausting. And I think that's why people are turned off by it and don't seek help. It takes a lot to get the right help and to get somebody that you're comfortable with. But it's worth it. I just want to say that. It's worth it, because when you do find the problem or how to fix it, the right medication, it makes your life completely better.
You can actually start to heal.
Exactly. But I do need to say that it usually is a long process, unfortunately.
It is. And I think that Julia just nailed it, is that you get to start to heal. You get to start to have some peace. You learn to enjoy the situation instead of dreading the end of the situation, as it would be in a case like mine, where instead of me going into every situation, like, when is this going to explode? I can go into a situation and say, I'm going to enjoy the crap out of this situation because it's great. I'm grateful to be with my friends and family. Now that we're all, as a society, experiencing this distance between us and the people that we're closest to, whether it's by, something as simple as, my mother-in-law comes over because we have a big backyard and we social distance because she's in her late 60s and we can be together at least. But I miss hugging her and all of those things. And so, but I can sit here and go, I know what hugging her is like, because I make sure and remember and pay attention to every situation. And that's what working that hard and my family working that hard for my mental health has brought me, is the ability to really enjoy and seek out those experiences, because it could all end tomorrow.
Yeah,
and so
that's fantastic.
It takes a long time to flip it. And I think that you just said it right there, Katrina, it's a slog, but it's a slog that's so worth it. So if you're just starting out there somewhere, hang in there, because it's worth it.
Keep going.
And
we have a good comment too.
Good, go for it.
Well, I have insomnia, and this is probably true. Got a lot worse after a trauma when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really big one that
you're probably reliving that event over and over, unable to sleep.
Yeah, those two things, I think that it's really, It's because it's a really common one in our society because we're working like all the time. We're working really hard and really fast, and we're always connected and all these things that, you know, the buzzwords. So we just assume that, you know, insomnia is a normal course of that. And that's basically what you're sold from kind of everywhere, is that, oh, you just can't sleep because you're busy. And it's like, no.
You're not meditating enough, okay? You're not
Okay,
doing
yeah.
yoga. That's why you can't sleep.
My cousin said a great thing to me today, and I'm probably going to piss some people off, but it's okay. It's all on me. This is my opinion. But he said, I liked when yoga was a good way of keeping your mind healthy and your body healthy and exercising. He's like, now it's become a little cultish. And sort of the cult of yoga is what now turns people off to it, which is unfortunate because I know people who benefit from traditional awesome yoga. They've used it but what happens is when you it's the coal walking, crystal using sort of attitude that we've talked about a little bit in the past, that unfortunately turns people off to viable potential treatments for what they need. But again, you have to find someone. There are great yoga studios who will help you out with all of that stuff. And then there's the, you know, stamp cutout, sort of cookie cutter yoga, cool yoga pants, cool hot yoga, look at us, like kind of.
I know people who use crystals very effectively.
I know, I'm sorry.
I have crystals myself. I use crystals.
Say that. I have a good friend, Stella. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. She's going to like fight too. I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah,
well, let's finish going through let's finish going through the last two criteria so we can get this checked off the list.
Okay.
So the final two are avoidance. You need to have one of these symptoms. This occurs when a person tries to avoid all reminders of the trauma, including avoiding external reminders of what happened and avoiding trauma-related thoughts or emotions, sometimes through the use of drugs or alcohol. And lastly, changes in reactivity. Two of these are required. This occurs when a person becomes more easily startled and reacts to frightful experiences more fully, including symptoms of aggression or irritability, hypervigilance and hyperawareness, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, heightened startle response, engaging in destructive or risky behavior, and difficulty sleeping or staying asleep. Mel, do you relate to those?
The staying asleep one was a big one. You just wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep. Concentration. And that's one that I will say is a bad one for me. And it's not just, you know, lose your train of thought. I'm staring at the television and there's a show on and we're both watching it together. I just missed everything that happened on there. Like completely drifted off, thinking about stuff I shouldn't have been. It's gotten much better because I'm way more aware of it. But I would be sitting in a room with people for years and it was like I was there but I wasn't there at all. Like everything was sort of outside of me, and people would talk to me and I wouldn't know what they had just said to me. I mean, it is really, and that what happens is you get frustrated because now your concentration is shot and you get mad at yourself because your concentration is just, why can't you just pay attention? And then that's, again, it's the spiral that happens with you not understanding why, instead of sort of stopping yourself and saying, hang on, can I refocus and have you repeat that to me because of my, I'm too stupid to pay attention and I need more sleep, or I'm not sleeping, or I'm sleeping too much, and it just doesn't. And the reactivity thing, irritability, I know I've talked about my anger situation, is that the outburst thing, I'm not a violent, but I flip out. That's a technical term for what I do. It's literally flipping out. But it's erratic flipping out. It's flipping out over something stupid. I dropped a napkin and now it is suddenly the end of the flippin' world. It shouldn't be. And maybe it's the second time I dropped the napkin in a row and I am a complete failure at life. I need to quit everything. Into the void with you. I'm making cute of it a little because that is also a coping mechanism of mine, in case everyone missed it. I'm big on humor. I think that humor is the best medicine in a lot of ways, as long as you're okay with laughing about things. Because at the end of the day, we're all human and we're kind of dorky and silly and do stupid crap and freak out about dumb things. And so being able to laugh at those things is something that has definitely helped me. And yeah, for a while I like stopped crying. I used to be really sensitive. Like I'd watch, Hallmark commercial kind of crying gal. I went through a period of time for years and years where I stopped being able to, nothing made me cry anymore, like at all. Like things that should make you cry, I would have no crying response to the point where it was concerning to me. Like I should definitely be crying here, and I don't even feel the
Did you feel numb?
I was just gonna say, yeah. Do you feel numb?
Did you feel numb overall?
I've had the just numb, where it was like I should be reacting. Everyone around me is reacting, and I'm just standing there like.
Is any of that medication related or no?
Some of it was when I was bouncing around. I have I've been on this, finally on the right medication for a long time now, where I have the right. So to me, what's really great about being on the right medication for a long time is you can start to feel when your levels are wrong. And when you need, like, I use very, very light sort of calming, the lorazepam level, sort of just like very low dose, because I'm a very sensitive to medication person. It's part of the reason I had to have more surgeries to, control my epilepsy, because medicine just wasn't working for me. So I'm the kind of person who does not react well to pharmaceuticals. And that definitely, some of those, one of the first drugs that they gave me, they put me on such a high dose that I was literally like happy all the time. It's like, it's 3 months. We're not going to get into that, because we've had this discussion, and the reason we don't do this, the reason I don't name drugs is because what doesn't work for me might be the perfect drug for someone else. And I don't want someone to not use it because of that reasoning, because these drugs are so specific to what they do. But because those SSRIs, the ones that they spoke about, which is my main drug that I am on, do a lot of crazy crap to your brain.
Yes, they do.
And they
only kind of scary.
And then it's interesting because the hypothalamic and things like that, that's actually part of my brain that was ultimately removed as part of the entire situation. And so there is some argument for some of the things that were bothering me along my lifeline, were contributing factors, of course. But it is very interesting that those were the things that were even affecting my epilepsy in the way that, because I can actually point to the parts of my brain and they can say, that's what happens in this part of your brain, and that's what happens in this part of your brain. And I'm kind of an interesting conversation in that regard, because I can literally tell you what parts of my brain are missing and how that affects the larger picture. So
that's all the criteria. So we made it through. It took us a while, but we made it. If you're experiencing one or more of any of those symptoms, you may want to speak to someone. Because I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but that's the criteria for PTSD. So if you're experiencing that, you may want to just talk to someone for some additional support.
It's worth it.
Absolutely. You know what? I think everybody should have a therapist.
Everyone should have a therapist.
No mental health condition. Just talk it out.
It should be
especially in the year 2020.
And 3/4. I think it should be part of we take our vitamins, right? And we do our yearly checkups if we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. We all should be able to do that. But I feel like my physician actually keeps a social worker and a nutritionist and a pharmacist on staff. He contracts them independently. It's very interesting. He's an incredible person he is practicing medicine the old school way, but with all new school tech. He's an older dude that's great. He's embraced all the tech, but I really found it interesting. And I've talked to his social worker before, because she is like another voice in my life. So I have my regular talk therapist, but every once in a while it's cool to talk to somebody that can give you, for me, I can't drive. So she gave me some community resources for getting around before things got crazy with the bugs. And it is a really helpful piece. And I wish everybody's doctor had a nutritionist and a social worker or therapist of some sort, because she's a counselor also.
Oh, yeah.
Nutritionist? What?
And he has a pharmacist, so you could go talk to the pharmacist, or you can go talk to the nutritionist. And these are people he works with. And I love that sort of whole health idea. And we were really lucky to have found him. And I know there are other people out there trying to model that as well. It's really difficult in our system. But maybe when you go into a place, if they have these things available to you, maybe that's the person you try out. You know, I mean, it's okay to call around to doctors. You call around for a new car, you call around for the price of a fridge, or, well, internet around, as it were. But you can internet around for everything else too. And that includes, like, you can look at reviews, or you can call and see if you like the receptionist. You'd be shocking what you can learn from receptionists. That's one of my past fields. When we like the people we work for, we usually act like it. So if you call somebody and have a really upbeat person working your front desk who talks to you and interacts, that might be a good sign for that person as a mental health or a medical health professional for you. Something to look for. Don't be afraid. Don't go the first one in the book, I guess is what I'm saying.
No,
or the top of the
I always
Google search.
Google that.
Don't go to the person at the top of the Google. They're not always necessarily.
No, but Google the name. Google the name.
Yeah. You can Yelp psychiatrists. You can read the reviews.
Exactly. A lot of people submit to doing it. I had a lot of specialists who explicitly said to me, I put myself out there on this extra service so that people can rate me, so that people do know that I am in this to try and help them, so they don't have to search as hard for the right epilepsy specialist or back specialist or whatever. So there are professionals out there at high levels who go out of their way to submit themselves for transparency. So look for that, because it is out there. You just gotta work for it.
So I would just say I agree. Any final thoughts on PTSD?
I'm glad we all learned something.
Oh my gosh, was it eye-opening?
Yeah, it definitely was. Thanks for sharing so much, Mel, of your personal story. It was really helpful to hear.
Thanks, guys. It's really helpful to get out there. I hope that people can benefit from it. We have all these experiences. We may as well use them for good.
Absolutely. With that being said, like, subscribe, comment, join us, come on air. Like, we'd be happy to have you. If you're a medical professional, especially. So give us a ring. I think that'll be it for tonight. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for a great show. Have a good evening.
Thanks for coming, everyone.